Great. I'm Richard Tindal. A little bit about our company first and why we're here. We're an online media company. We operate a family of websites in a variety of categories: sports, entertainment, educational websites. We have about 70 million unique visitors a month, so that puts us in the top 25 website category families in the US. So we have a fairly large online audience. We're also the second largest ICANN registrar, eNom, with 12 million names managed. We've been in this ICANN process for 11 years. And probably most appropriate to today's discussion, we intend to apply for a TLD. We're a very pro-TLD company. We believe that TLDs are going to bring considerably improved choice and price and services to consumers. I've got to learn to press this button each time. So a little bit about our philosophy on the IRT, what we think it's not about. We don't think it's about whether there should be TLDs or not. As I said, we're very pro TLDs, and in any event, the charter of the IRT is not about the question of whether there should be TLDs or not. It's about trademark protection. Indeed, in our view, the question of whether there should be additional protections in new TLDs, from our point of view, that's not an issue either. We absolutely believe there needs to be. We think that there are significant problems in existing TLDs, particularly .com, and so we would like to see improvements in the new TLDs. And then finally, we don't view the IRT process, the way it's been set up, as invalid in any way. The board passed a resolution. The IRT is going to be one voice in this debate, and I'm sure today we're going to hear a lot of other voices as well. So what is it about? In our view, it's about finding practical, workable solutions that improve trademark rights, but without unnecessarily impinging on the other legitimate uses of names. And so how do we decide, what's the methodology by which we can assess these various proposals? I think the IRT did a pretty good job of defining that. In the report, pages 7 and 11, they spell out these 10 guiding principles about what an effective RPM should do. Let me read a couple of them. Should protect the existing rights of trademark owners, but neither expand those rights nor create additional legal rights. Provide clear benefits to trademark owners and new registries such that as many as possible will be incented to use the recommended solution. The recommendation should not result in unnecessary or undue costs, either to trademark owners, registrars, registries, or legitimate users and consumers. So I encourage everyone that hasn't seen those guiding principles to have a look at them. We think that they're pretty good, and they're the benchmarks by which we applied our analysis of the 7 proposed RPMs. And so in the report, there are effectively 7 proposals. 4 of those we endorse, and I'm going to go through each of the 7. 4 of them we endorse: the IP clearinghouse, the thick Whois, the pre-launch mechanisms of sunrise or IP claims, and the algorithm expansion. We endorse those 4 proposals. There's 2 of the proposals that we believe need to be modified before they're implemented, and those are the URS and the post-delegation dispute. And there is 1 proposal that we think fails the 10 benchmark guidelines, and we believe it's flawed and it needs to be rejected, and that's the GPML. So let's look at each of these in turn. The IP clearinghouse, as a previous speaker said, it does not create policy. This is an authenticated database that registries will use in conformance with their contracts and their policies. It's not creating policy. What it does do is create efficiency and standardization in the marketplace. Instead of a trademark holder having to go to, let's say there are 100 registries, having to go to each individual registry and have their identity and their trademark validated, now they can go to one central place to have it done. So it's really an efficiency mechanism. It's obviously an important and complex job, so it needs to be well thought through and implemented. That goes without saying, I think. And then my last point here, I think, is interesting because I think there's going to be some speakers that talk to whether or not ICANN should be creating this IP clearinghouse. In our view, if it's not mandated by ICANN, the market will in fact create this because of the inherent need for efficiency in the process. Nevertheless, we think that there would probably be multiple clearinghouses if the market was left to do that. There'll be different viewpoints probably on whether that's a good or a bad thing. As long as the contract's well framed and the procurement process is run well, we think that it's okay for ICANN to have a single central clearinghouse. The thick Whois we similarly support. It has never been previously mandated, although, as Jeff said earlier, most registries have tended to adopt it. Let me quote from the IRT report. The thick Whois is essential to the cost-effective protection of consumers and intellectual property owners. And as probably you've noted, the current version of the draft applicant guidebook has the thick Whois already in there for discussion. And so, in our view, this is going to be an acceptable rights protection mechanism. We view it as a major improvement for rights holders to have this thick Whois requirement. The concerns that have been expressed are privacy related, but as previously noted as well, there is a mechanism that ICANN's provided for registries who are in jurisdictions with privacy issues where they can go through that process and not be in breach of their national laws. The pre-launch mechanisms we support also. The registry gets to choose whether they want to run a sunrise mechanism or an IP claims mechanism. Both these mechanisms have been proven and tested with previous launches. They are of finite duration, as previously noted, so these are not mechanisms that run in perpetuity with the registry. They just last for the first month or 2 months, whatever the registry chooses. One thing the IRT has done, I think, which is great, is they've modified really previous sunrise mechanisms such that now the registry can choose to apply rights that are applicable to the particular string. So if I have the .shu registry and Microsoft is in the IP clearinghouse, I may not choose to apply Microsoft.shu, to allocate Microsoft.shu during the sunrise phase because the classification of their trademark is not relevant to my TLD, but I might apply it to Nike. Again, the registry will be able to choose that method. I'm not saying that the registry would not apply Microsoft, but we think it's good that the IRT has introduced this improvement, if you like, on previous sunrises in which that registry can make that judgment about trademark classification. And we have not seen, we've tried to read all the comments on the IRT, we've not seen significant criticism of this particular RPM, of the pre-launch RPMs. So it seems to us there is reasonably good consensus on those. And then finally, this expanded algorithm, we support it also. It's, as noted previously, when there's a visual flag, or a pre-existing visual flag between two strings, the IRT is proposing that these additional standards of oral or meaning be applied. We can't see any particular problems or issues with that. It's all that the IRT is proposing is that those names then be flagged for further review. So it's not sort of creating a bright line rule there. It's rather flagging them for further review. And importantly, it's not changing any of the existing objection mechanisms that are in the draft applicant guidebook at the moment. So similarly, we see no problems with this RPM. We think it meets the benchmark guidelines and we endorse it. Okay, let's move on to the two that we have some concerns with. The URS, in our view, is probably the flagship rights protection mechanism here. And by that I mean we think it has the most potential to protect legitimate trademark rights. Some important features of the URS. It only applies if the name is actually used. Okay, so unlike the UDRP, with the URS there has to be use of the name with a website. The initial freeze of the name when the claim is submitted, that doesn't disable the website at all. It just freezes the contact data, if you like, that's in the Whois. The intended standard is absolute, clear-cut, the slam dunk test, if you like. The URS will only be applicable for trademarks from jurisdictions that conduct substantive examination of the trademark application. So I'm not a trademark attorney, but I interpret that as meaning that if you have a jurisdiction that really doesn't review the trademark but simply grants it, that would not be subject to a URS judgment. Importantly, if the registrant does not respond to the email or the registered mail that's sent to them, there is not a default judgment. The URS provider is going to go through the same standard of evaluation whether or not the registrant responds. There is no fee to the registrant unless the claim is for 25 names or more than 25 names. So if you have a URS filed against you, you don't have to pay a fee. If you have 10 domain names and one trademark holder is filing one URS against you for all 10 of those, you still don't have a fee. So the respondent only has this threshold of fee when there are 25 or more names subject to one URS claim. So these are all good things that we think are well thought through and we like. And we think the URS is going to be very effective in attacking really the objective of this RPM, which is sort of the serial cyber squatter that has extensive portfolios of names and it's a fairly blatant infringement. So we think it's going to work for that. The concern we have with the URS is that we think it's going to be abused because it is fast and it is cheap. There is the potential for overreaching trademark owners and for, how do I go backwards? There we go. Yeah, so we think there's a potential for abuse. It's going to capture the people that it intends to capture, the sharks, but it's going to catch some dolphins as well in the net. So we've put on the table for discussion a range of ideas that we think could improve the URS, and I think there'll be some discussion hopefully on these sorts of modifications today. I've listed here a variety of things that we think could potentially improve the URS. Limit it to one trademark per claim. Increase the fee that the claimant has to pay. Require a bond. In our initial proposal on a takedown method, pre-IRT, we had this concept of a bond. We think that's worthy of discussion. Increase the time that the registrant has to respond. Fax notice. Review the process on a 6-monthly period. Compress the volume price tiers. At the moment, the way that it's structured, you can put a claim in from 0 to 25 names with one fee, 26 to 100 with another fee. We think the potential for abuse could be reduced if those tiers are compressed somewhat. And then the last one here, which I've highlighted, which we have only really been thinking through the last week or so, but we think it's quite interesting, is the notion that a URS could only be submitted for a minimum number of names. And so let's hypothetically say that's 10. And so you could only submit a URS against one registrant that had 10 names or more that are allegedly infringing your mark. And so what's interesting to us about that particular modification is that it would presumably pull out of the mix a lot of the individual domain holders who, as we're going to hear this afternoon, are going to be concerned about the misuse of the URS. We're not wedded to any of these particular solutions. We think these are some ways to reduce the potential for abuse. I think our takeaway on the URS is that we like it conceptually. We think it's potentially the best rights protection mechanism, but we know for a fact through our experience that it will be abused as it's currently structured, so we need to find ways to reduce that potential for abuse. Post-delegation dispute mechanism. Again, this is one that we support in part. We want to modify it. The part about it we like is the part that requires registries to conform with their undertakings in their proposal and to conform with their contracts. The part we don't like is the portion that talks about systematic bad faith intent, manner of use, and other sort of subjective terms. We think that they're poorly defined, that there is potentially going to be abuse of that sort of mechanism. We think that where that comes from is the notion that ICANN is not enforcing its contracts. That's where we believe this proposed mechanism is coming from. So first of all, we refute that. In our view, ICANN's compliance is certainly in our view, strong and in improving. Resource has been applied to compliance, and it is a high priority for the management of ICANN. So we don't view that assertion that there's this sort of rampant non-compliance as a real problem. And in any event, for people who believe that is a problem, we think the appropriate mechanism is let's fix that. If it is a problem, let's fix it. Let's not introduce these subjective provisions and third-party beneficiary rights into a contract between ICANN and the registry. So finally, the RPM that we oppose completely is the globally protected marks list. We think, first of all, it's going to be extremely complex and controversial and politicized to come up with this list. There's already considerable debate about what the criteria should be. In the comments, there's already people arguing for additional criteria in addition to the ones that are currently on the table, which is a certain number of trademark registrations in a certain number of countries and regions. We think that even if we can agree on the criteria, there's going to be extensive controversial debate about what those thresholds should be, because the numbers, the number of countries, for example, is just an inherently subjective thing. Should it be 100? Should it be 99? There's really no logical reason behind what a particular number should be. And I think we're seeing that in practice, because what the IRT have asked ICANN to do here is sort of go away and come up with, let's look at some famous marks, if you like. Obviously, they didn't use the word famous. Let's look at some well-known marks and come up with how many trademarks they have. And to us, that just highlights the inherent problem of this. It's a subjective thing. ICANN's really looking at a number of marks and saying, okay, well, that one probably should be on the list because we all sort of think that it's extremely well-known. I wonder how many trademarks it has. So, we just don't think there's a solution there that's going to work. We think it's going to be extremely politicized, and we think also that there will be sort of some regions who feel they're underrepresented in the way this list is derived, and they'll want to have potentially a lower standard, let's say for marks from a particular region. So very, very hard to come up with this list in our view. If it was powerful and worthwhile, maybe it's worth going through that process, but we don't think it is. We don't think that it adds any new protections at the top level that aren't already in the draft applicant guidebook. In our view, what's in the guidebook now in terms of objections is equally powerful for the brand holder to protect at the top level. So we don't think the GPML adds any value at the top level. And at the second level, we think it's really quite marginal benefits. There is going to be presumably a very small number of brands on that list. They only would protect an exact match at the second level. And they've got, absent the GPML, they've got sunrise provisions, they've got URS if that goes through, and we think a range of other protections that are going to be, where the cost benefit of the other RPMs really exceeds the GPML. So this particular RPM, we think, really, at the end of the day, the costs of this are going to significantly outweigh the benefits it brings. On the flip side, if the list is extensively large, then we have a problem with that as well, because then we're going to have common generic dictionary words that are on a list, creating this sort of preemptive right where if I want a common word at the second level, I'm going to have to go and seek the approval of Time Warner to get the word, time.watch. So we don't think the intent is that the list be long. We think the intent is that it would be quite short. Given that, again, we think that the benefits of the list are going to be significantly outweighed by its costs. And so in summary then, there's more in the IRT report that we endorse than we oppose as an applicant and an experienced registry operator. 4 of the proposals, as I said, we endorse. 2 of them, the URS and the post-delegation, we'd like to see modified. And the GPML, we think, should be dropped.